Hi, Valerie Dawn here. Today I'm excited to guide you through piecing the Spring Roses quilt top. In this step-by-step tutorial, I'll show you a quick and efficient method to create a batch of half-square triangles. Then we'll assemble the quilt blocks where I'll share tips for keeping everything aligned perfectly. Next, I'll guide you on how to press your seams so they lay flat, giving your blocks a crisp, professional finish. Finally, we'll assemble the full quilt top, and by the end of this video, you'll have all the knowledge you need to piece this beautiful quilt. This is the Spring Roses quilt, the OnPoint version that I created with Electric Quilt 8. This is the yardage that is recommended by Electric Quilt 8 to complete this design. It's approximately 70 by 70, and you will also need backing fabric and quilt batting and thread. These are the blocks we need to make for this quilt top. There's 6 of each color variations, and then there will be a number of these half blocks to fit around the edge of the quilt because it is an on point, and so there are half blocks around the edge. This is a sample of the border, which is our anchor fabric and the dark rose. The first thing we're going to make, though, is our half square triangles. And if you look in the pattern, there's a half square triangle, and that's the dark rose and the cream. There's the color fabric with the cream, and there's a third half square triangle. So each block has 3 half square triangles. I'll show you a technique on how to quickly create a whole batch of half square triangles at once without wasting any fabric. I'm going to draw on the reverse side. I'm going to draw this template, and each of these squares is 3.5 inches. These are actually the cutting lines, not the stitching lines. So I will draw these lines, and then I use them as a guide with my 1/4 inch sewing machine foot to sew a 1/4 inch seam on either side of each one of these lines. I'm using the cutting mat to measure this template onto the fabric backing. Make sure you're working on the back, and I'm leaving a 1/4 inch selvage, and this is just a regular lead pencil. Move over 3.5 inches. All right, there's one of my lines, and the other one that's 3.5 inches is right here, which leaves another 1/4 inch selvage on the other side. And draw a 1/4 inch, which is the other selvage edge, and then draw 3.5 inches all the way along. Okay. Now, we also need to draw diagonal lines. These are our cutting lines, and we stitch 1/4 inch on either edge, on either side. I've cut a piece of the dark rose the exact same size as the cream fabric. Place them right sides together. That's important. You will have to start over if you don't get these right sides together. Straight pins that I will pin it together. I will remind you once again, make sure you have the right sides together. These are mistakes that I've made myself that I'm reminding you about, because if you don't have the right sides together, you'll have to pick out every thread and start over. The straight lines are my cutting lines. Line up right on the diagonal and sew 1/4 inch on each side of these diagonal cutting lines. When I come to the edge here, this corner, I'm going to just do a tiny back stitch, and then I'm going to lift the needle and hop over that corner because I don't want to stitch over that. Reposition your needle on the next straight line. All right. Now, I generally don't cut the threads. I just keep going. Now, see on this one, insert the needle right on this straight line. I lightly press this patch of half square triangles. All I have left to do is cut them apart, and I'm lining it up with the pencil lines that I drew. The reason we make these a little bit larger, because these are made 1/8 of an inch larger than the pattern calls for. As you stitch and press, they get a little bit distorted because while you're stitching on the diagonal. That will give us some leeway to trim them so that they are perfectly square. Right down the center. All that's left is for us to press our half square triangles open. Finger press it lightly without stretching because that is the diagonal, and then press down lightly, and you can give it a tiny press of steam. And then I also like to snip off the dog ears. We do that for all of our half square triangles. I've completed all of the half square triangles in the quilt. I'm just going to show you how that relates to the block. This is the block pattern created by Electric Quilt 8, and it shows the key block that shows all of the pieces where they fit. This is the diagram. All right, this is the pink one, which is right here. This is the bottom corner, this one right here. And this one fits here, and this one fits here. All right, now what I need now is this plain cream colored square. This is the patch, the 3x3 patch that will fit here. That's patch number F. If you look at the key diagram, number F is right there. You need a perfect 3-inch cut. I can stack these now. I have them 4 layers deep. Take the salvage off, and then I just reposition my ruler every 3 inches. Now I'm going to get my sewing machine out again, and we'll piece these inner blocks of the hunter star. Let's start by aligning our blocks so you can see 1/4 of the hunter star. Now when you're doing the plain blocks, be careful that you get the right side. Some of them are right side up and some of them are face down. So simply take one of these, align it carefully. You may find that the half square triangles are 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch larger than 3x3. That's because we made them slightly larger. Once we're done this, we'll trim them off. I like to do that so that because they become a little bit skewed as you stitch and press, I can trim this off after and have perfectly square 3x3. Here's a trick, because sometimes when you start your sewing machine, it will knot up on the back side of your first stitch. Get a scrap piece of fabric, start the stitch, and then you will have an easier time when you place this. Now this is a 1/4 inch sewing foot. I just line it up here and begin stitching. This is another power sewing technique. You don't snip the threads. You simply line them up and make sure you keep your pieces lined up the way they need to stitch together. Line it up. Keep sewing. See, that one was upside down. Make sure you get the right sides together, or you'll end up with your seam ripper picking stitches out. Okay, before we move on, I just want to recommend, take a look at your seam, find a ruler that measures 1/4 inch, and just make sure you're getting a 1/4 inch seam. If not, make some adjustments. Our next step is to paste these two. Make sure that if it's your pink, make sure these are together. Place them right sides together and begin stitching. I'm going to line it up with this corner here so that I have a nice crisp 1/4 inch right there. Seam down so that it doesn't bunch up. It goes neatly. And keep stitching. Snip them apart. Press it toward the plain fabric. So we'll press these this direction. These ones fit this way. We're going to press it toward the other way. so that when we stitch them together, you will see that the seams fit together. I'm going to press all of these and then we'll stitch. We put these right sides together and you'll see that seam locks together. I like to use my seam ripper. You can use a stiletto, but I like just to use my little seam ripper to help feed the fabric under the fold. Make sure your bottom seam, this bottom seam, is laying flat. Okay, see they fit together very nicely. Give it a little press to set the stitches flat. We're going to flip it open. We're going to press it toward this side. These blocks are 10-inch, the entire block. So that means the finished size of this block is 5 by 5. And remember, we add a 1/4 inch seam all the way around it. The block with seam allowances is 5.5. What we want to do is trim this so that it's 5.5. Swing that around. So go around each one and make it as square as possible. Once you have these 6 blocks completed, move on and complete the other 3 colors, 6 blocks of each one of those, and then we will move on to completing the log cabin portion of this quilt block. This pattern is just showing the cutting instructions for each of the strips along the outside. So we have piece A here, B, which is the half square triangles at the edge of the strips, and then we have D, E, and F. This is for the pink block. We need to make 6 of these full blocks, and the approach will be strip cutting. We'll cut a 3-inch strip of the pink and a 3-inch strip of the peach and the gray and the green. The cream color are 3 3/8 inch because these are larger. You need to make them larger than the 3 inches to accommodate the diagonal. And we need 4 of those for each block. You can cut 1 square and then cut it down the center and gain 2. And let's turn to the cutting mat and get started. I'll start with the pink. Make sure the fabric is squared off along the cutting edge and line it up on the board. Line the ruler up exactly to 3 inches and do a cut. I would like you to cut a strip of each of the other colors, the peach, the gray, and the green. The next step is we're going to cut the diagonal. It's 10 7/8, which is almost 11 inches. You can cut it 11 inches and have that 1/8 of an inch extra. And this is a 45-degree angle, which we can use the cutting mat to do that. Now, the very, very important thing about this pattern is you have to be very careful of the direction of the diagonal cut because some of them go the other direction. So you have to pay very close attention to the cutting directions. Let's open this up. And I'm just going to square off the end here. The next thing we will do is use our cutting mat and the diagonal. It's almost 11 inches. This is 0.0 to 11 inches. Lay the strip on the mat. Line it up so that point where you need it at 11 inches. It's actually 10 7/8, but it's very close to 11, so the extra 1/8 of an inch you can use for adjustment. Okay, lay it there. Put your cutting ruler over the top and align it with that diagonal and make it clean. And then just, you have the strip that matches the right diagonal and the right width here. The next one, because you need 6 of these, turn it around, and this is already the right angle. And so what you need to do is simply cut that at 11 inches right there. Go ahead and cut all of the 6 pink strips and then do the same with the orange, gray, and green, following the width in the pattern and making sure you get the diagonal cut in the right direction. The next thing we need are the B squares. That's 3 3/8 by 3 3/8. I think I have a strip here that's actually 3 1/2. I do. So I will cut each one of these at 3 1/2. Gives me a little bit of leeway. You can stack these ones. That gives me 2. Because the next thing we're going to do is cut it on the diagonal. Line it right up here. And cut on the diagonal, which gives us 2 half square triangles. Make sure you get the right sides together and we're going to stitch along the diagonal. Now that you have all of the log cabin strips pieced and the half square triangle stitched with a 1/4 inch seam along here, it's time to press them open and do just a light press here to set the seam. You have half of the strips that angle to the right and half that angle to the left. Left, right. The ones that angle to the right, flip this open and press toward the half square triangle. Be careful to press down so that you don't stretch that seam because it's on the diagonal and the bias of the fabric will stretch. And for the strips that angle to the left, flip this over, just like that, and press toward the strip. This is going to help us when we paste this to keep the seam bulk down as much as possible. Now we're ready to put the block together. Okay, we've got this block that we made earlier of our half square triangles, and we will add the green, and then we add the gray, the pink, and finally we add the peach. That will be the sewing sequence. When you're piecing these together, line the edge up here. Alright, let's take a look at that. What we want to see when we press it open is you have a 1/4 inch here so that you don't bury that point when you stitch it to the next block. And you also want to be careful with this one that you don't bury this point either. We're going to press this toward the green patch and we'll stitch it along here. Get our steam iron, press lightly. This one though, we are going to press toward the center. Now, what we can do, because that one's a bit bulky, you're going to have a bulky seam somewhere. Lay it flat there. And press down. We want to make sure our points are not buried. We have a nice sharp point on each one of these. The next one we do is the pink. Going to line up the corner here. We press in this direction. The next piece will be the peach along here, right here. Once you have the 4 blocks pieced, lay them out to match the pattern. Remember, you're piecing them in diagonal rows along this way. I'm just laying this out so you can see. Now, we pressed the seams in one direction, and these are in the opposite direction. So these 2 seams line up, and these seams, the seam is on this side and on this side here, so they lock together. So you see when you place them together, they line up very nicely so that the seams are the least amount of bulk as you can have. See, that's right there, and you can lock those together so that you get a nice sharp point. these to the sewing machine and stitch them. Now that I have these two sections stitched together and these stitched together, I'll show you that you want to press the seam toward the left diagonal, and I'll show you why. That will minimize the amount of bulk we have in each one of these intersections, and it also makes them opposite. So this one will place together against this one in each one of these seams. And I finished piecing the whole hunter star area, and I've completed this just to show you the pressing sequence. Now we're ready to assemble the whole quilt, and remember, we're going in diagonal rows. I'm just going to flip this over so you can see the seams and how they fit together in opposite directions so that all of these lay as flat as possible. And now we're ready to assemble the remainder of the quilt top. To help me lay out the half blocks around the perimeter, I've deleted the interior just so I could get a good look at the layout of each of these. Half of them have the dark pink blocks, and the other half have the green or pink or peach or gray blocks. So lay each one of those out, and you can line it so that this edge follows the diagonal line on the board. We need to make sure we have a 1/4 inch seam right here. This needs to be a 1/4 inch here. A cut, and you will have all of your blocks with a nice straight edge ready to apply the border. I've also done an electric quilt layout where I deleted the perimeter half blocks. This gives me a better view of the full block layout. Take all of your completed blocks and lay them out on a flat surface to match the pattern here. These are the 2 blocks in the top right corner. You can pin these if you prefer. And we have our first block stitched together. I have pieced these 2 blocks together, and the other thing I've done, I've shown you side by side the quilt with the full blocks and the quilt with the half blocks, just to make it easier to line these up. Now I'm looking for these 2 corner blocks right here, and they will fit here and here. Here's one of them, and here's the other. Continue piecing the blocks and half blocks together in diagonal rows like this, making sure that you match the pattern layout. As you complete each diagonal row, press the seams in opposite directions as shown by the arrows, so they lie flat when the rows are joined. So that's going to give you 8 diagonal rows. Next, cut 6 full width strips of the dark rose fabric, each measuring 1 1/4 inch. Now the finished width of this will be 3/4 of an inch, so you need to cut 1 1/4 inch, so you have a 1/4 inch seam on either side, and you need 6 of those. And now you also cut 6 full width strips of floral anchor fabric, each measuring 5 1/4 inches. And that gives you a 1/4 inch on each side, plus a little bit, because I always find on the outside edge of the quilt you lose a little bit. When you have the quilt sandwiched together, it gets a little messy all the way around the edges. Now stitch all of those strips together end to end. Apply the dark rose border around each side of the quilt, pressing the seams toward the dark rose. Then apply the floral border, the outside edges first, and then apply the top and bottom border so the seams are here and here and there and there. The final step of adding the dark rose binding will be completed after the quilting is finished. Thank you so much for buying me coffees and sending me tips. If you enjoyed this video, please take a moment to press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more great videos. Happy quilting!